Welcome, critters. I'm Clara Jones, your devoted host of the Sacred Reading CR podcast, where we discuss and examine Critical Role episodes, plot lines, characters, and players through the lens of sacred reading practices. This particular episode is about Campaign 1, episode
34.
34. Thank you. Part 2. And joining me today is Atlas.
Hey, we're in peak form already.
I know. We are both exhausted. So we're going to try our best today. But the icebreaker that I literally just found 2 seconds ago is if you had to choose your age forever, like if you just had to stay at the same age for all time, what age would you choose and why?
Um, I don't know. Haven't experienced it yet, but probably mid-30s, old enough that you are not going to get carded at a bar, young enough that nobody's going to tell you you're old.
Hmm.
Like, just somewhere in the middle where you can be innocuous. If you're going to
Hmm.
be immortal, be innocuous. Or if you're
Hmm.
going to be the same age forever, be innocuous. Like,
Hmm.
just don't draw attention to yourself. So, somewhere that nobody really pays attention to, but old enough that, you have a fully developed brain.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, as someone who is in their mid-30s, I am going to choose a little bit younger because I'm currently dealing with back problems.
Fair enough.
So I think I'm going to go with, I think 29, I think 28, 29, something like that. Um, because you have that like developed frontal lobe going on and you do feel like more or less an adult at that point, and you do have, things to choose from, but it comes without the back pain.
Fair enough. I don't know. Being that age, I feel like another year or two would be a good thing right about now.
Yeah,
But
yeah. My hips crack way too much when I squat for my comfort at this point in time. So me and my cat chiropractor, we're real close at this point. So I'm gonna choose 29, I think. 29 was it was an awful year for me personally, but I think I could do it better the second time around.
that is a fair point. Yeah. I mean, most of my thing of like avoiding the 28, 29 was those years sucked.
Hmm. Yeah, but I have the chance to redo them this time around. So if I
Good
could
point.
redo them, I'd do them better.
There you go.
Well, please join us as we embark on this exciting adventure in story analysis and self-reflection in order to deepen our understanding of ourselves and the world around us. As always, we love hearing your own insights and stories as well. So please comment, like, subscribe below, and ready? All right, let's dive in. As we open the second half of this episode, Atlas, take it away.
All right. We come back to the action with the party preparing to climb through the acid-scarred hallway in pursuit of the Briarwoods, Cassandra, and Vax, who is charmed. They are beginning to move As they are beginning to move forward, a dark energy travels up Percy's pepper box, and the previously empty barrel now has Cassandra's name etched across it.
Mm.
Percy freezes in realization, and when the party asks if he is all right, he actually admits that he is not. The group stealths into the corridor, reasoning that the Briarwoods must assume them dead. As they move, they come across freshly dug earth and evidence of lots of moving materials. Grog pauses to pick up a large piece of whitestone and puts it in the bag of holding. Vex tries to rub some of her arrows in the whitestone, but it mostly falls off because it's a rock.
Mm.
They come to a large room, and in the center is the ziggurat that they've been hearing about this entire time. It's a large structure with a base of white stone that slowly transitions to a greenish color, and there's a small structure on top of the ziggurat that can be reached by a long stairway on either side of the pyramid. There is an ominous glow about the entire place. Vex and Percy catch sight of four people halfway up the ziggurat stairs, and Keyleth notices that they are likely under the sun tree geographically. In spite of his charmed state, Vax is taking any free moment to look at the symbol of Sarenrae sewn into his glove, but the energy seems to have transitioned to serve as part of Pike's astrally projected form. The rest of the party debates briefly about taking a short rest, but have to weigh that against the probability that Vax is in real danger and they don't know what the Briarwoods intend to do when they reach the top. Vex chooses to fly up for a bird's eye view of what happens next. Keyleth asks Pike if Sarenrae and Pelor are on good terms given their proximity to the Sun Tree, and Pike confirms that they have a lot in common and are probably friends. The party continues to throw ideas around regarding their approach, but Vex takes a moment from her new vantage point to talk to Vax. Vax is influenced to consider the Briarwoods his closest allies, but that doesn't stop him from being able to reply to his sister. He asks where she is and insists that she should join him where he is to protect them. Noticing Vax's conversation, Delilah asks who he's talking to and pushes through the effect of the charm. And Vax pushes through the effect of the charm to lie, implying he is praying to Sarenrae. Delilah tells him that such deities are not welcome here and to put that away. The party begins to flank the ziggurat, moving in smaller groups and mostly staying out of sight. As they start to move up the stairs, they note the base of the structure is very old, but the stone gets newer, implying that it's been reconstructed more recently, perhaps directly for the Briarwoods. They are also able to note that with the color change comes a change in texture, so the greener blocks have a more glass-like surface. As they get close to the top, Grog starts to rage, and Vex watches as the Briarwoods speak to Vax and Cassandra before turning to open the doors to the top chamber. Scanlan takes a moment to inspire Pike, and Vex dips her arrows in holy oil, preparing for a fight. Percy walks up the steps in full view, pulling on his mask as he goes. He feels the nerves of anticipation, and the smoke begins to billow from his collar and sleeves. He yells his iconic Silas as he approaches, and both Lord and Lady Briarwood turn to look. As his friends prepare attacks, and he readies a contraption of his own, he begs for a moment of their time, reminding them of their debts to settle. Silas comments that the evening might not be boring after all, and Percy responds with, "The darkness demands your soul, Silas." The party lets loose the attacks they've been preparing, including a smoke bomb from Percy, a conjure barrage of holy arrows from Vex, and a daylight spell from Keyleth. Vax calls out, trying to understand why his sister is attacking, but receives no answer. They roll initiative, and the whole party rolls low, which bodes well for this fight. Lady Briarwood steps out of the smoke Percy's bomb created, and the only thing she can see is Trinket. Instead, she grants Silas a boon and steps back into the fog. Scanlan steps up to cast a lightning bolt before remembering that it didn't work on Delilah in a previous fight and casting blindness instead, which fails. Vax moves to shield Lady Briarwood, blaming Percy's smoke demon for the attacks and urging his party to stop. Grog moves to a better position, and Silas leaps out of the fog to land in front of Percy with his onyx sword drawn. He lands 2 hits on Percy and saps part of his strength, reducing that modifier. Grog uses his held action and the chain of returning to throw his warhammer covered in holy oil at Silas. Pike uses her sprinter's boots to get close to Vax and cast Greater Restoration, which frees him from the Briarwood influence, but he holds his stance, hoping to trick them into thinking he's still on their side. Pike moves behind a pillar for cover. Vex shoots a storm arrow at Silas, hitting twice, followed by another holy arrow. Percy uses Second Wind and shoves Diplomacy at Silas, a device he has never used before. The glove works, damaging Silas, and Percy takes 2 sword slashes as well, since he is too close to use his gun effectively. Percy turns to run and is hit by Silas's opportunity attack, but this time makes his save against the strength-sapping effect. Silas uses a legendary action to disengage and appears directly in front of Percy and Grog, where they are hiding behind a pillar. Cassandra attacks Grog and manages to hit. Keyleth casts Sunbeam, hitting Cassandra, Silas, and Grog. Cassandra dodges, Silas uses a legendary action to resist it, and Grog takes the full damage. Delilah moves away from Vax, and he takes an attack of opportunity on her with a poisoned blade. She responds by using Power Word Stun, and he fails his save. Scanlan tries to cast Hold Person, but Delilah resists it, so he inspires Percy and ducks behind Vax for cover. Vax continues to fail his saving throw against the stun. Silas uses a legendary action to move again, so Grog turns his attacks on Cassandra instead. Silas's regeneration ability is stunted by the use of radiant and holy damage, but he moves into Keyleth's daylight spell to attack Percy, hitting twice. Pike uses her sprinter's boots again to get Percy in range for healing word. She follows up by slamming her Mace of Disruption on the ground, doing some radiant damage to Silas. Vex sends a couple of arrows at Delilah, and Trinket moves to protect Vax. She tries to hide, but instead casts Hunter's Mark on Delilah when she realizes she is out in the open. Silas uses another legendary action to make an attack on Percy. Percy responds with 3 sword attacks, only managing to hit once. Cassandra looks as though she is moving to attack Percy, but spends her turn doing nothing, indicating she is in a state of conflict. Keyleth runs up to use her Sunbeam again, and Silas uses another legendary resistant to minimize the damage. As a legendary action, he hits Keyleth with his sword, but he's looking pretty rough at this point. Delilah rushes up and attempts to cast Dimension Door, but Scanlan successfully counterspells her. Scanlan inspires Grog and holds his action for later in the round. Vax fails another saving throw against his stunned condition, and Silas again uses his legendary action to move, becoming a pattern. Grog turns his strikes on Lady Briarwood now that Silas is out of reach, missing the first 2 and hitting on the third. Scanlan uses his held action to punch Delilah with Bigby's hand. Silas points at Grog and attempts to charm him, but cannot because of Grog's rage. Pike runs up to Silas and hits him with her Mace of Disruption. Silas also fails a saving throw and becomes afraid of Pike. Vex shoots Silas with holy arrows, hitting him once. At this point, Silas's form is heavily damaged and he's starting to fall apart. Vex, worried that her potion is going to wear off, lands on the overhang of one of the pillars so she does not fall. Percy shoots Silas with a disarming shot, making him drop the blade. The second shot damages Silas, who turns into mist, and the third is an ice shot aimed at Delilah. He uses an action surge to keep shooting at her, and by the end, she's looking pretty rough. He backs away at the end of his turn, appearing to run. Cassandra uses a greater healing potion on Lady Briarwood, much to the chagrin of the party, but also living up to her state of confusion. Delilah thanks her and urges Silas, quote, to the ritual. Keyleth steps up and blasts Silas in his misform with her Sunbeam, killing him permanently. Delilah sees this and screams, "You can't! I broke the world for us." Noting that it is too soon, she heads toward the structure again. She manages to cast Dimension Door successfully this time and vanishes from sight. Cassandra is still in the space looking conflicted, but the combat eases. Pike tries to cast Remove Curse on Vax, which fails since he's not actually cursed. And once a minute is up, he regains his abilities. Grog grabs Cassandra and drags her to the edge despite Percy's protests. Grog ends up knocking her unconscious, and they tie her up to deal with later. Percy starts working on the door to the chamber at the top, and Grog picks up Silas's dropped sword. Vex, from her position atop the pillar, can see inside the roofless temple atop the ziggurat, where Lady Briarwood stands atop a platform. Vex starts lowering a rope on the far side of the wall and notices a green flash of light from the platform where Delilah is reading from a scroll. The rest of the party start climbing into the temple with Vex's rope. Vex shoots at Delilah, misses the first time, and hits the second. Delilah continues her ritual as the party scrambles to get closer and pauses to lob a fireball in the direction of Vex, Vax, and Percy. Percy tries to fire his pepper box at Delilah, but misfires and is unable to make the repairs needed. Delilah finishes reading her scroll and it vanishes. She spills her own blood on a dark orb on the platform, continuing her efforts at whatever ritual she's attempting. Those on top of the walls notice the writhing of hundreds of bodies lining the walls, and the black orb begins to rise. Vax throws 2 daggers at Delilah, and Vex shoots an arrow at the orb but hits a pillar instead. Keyleth tries to pull the blood from the orb, but there's a power holding it there and it remains unmoved. Scanlan tries to cast Suggestion to get Delilah to stop, but she makes the save again. Percy tries to make a shot with bad news. The first shot misfires, but he is able to repair it this time and hits her with the second. Delilah is in a rough spot, but also appears anticipatory and trapped. She aims a spell at Vex, leaving her at 1 hit point. The dark orb begins to spin and then shrinks to a speck, and Delilah falls to her knees, believing she has failed. Vex plummets as her fly spell ends, ending up unconscious. Vax leaps to the ground trying to reach his sister, and Pike tries a healing word, but the spell has no effect. Grog makes it up and over the wall to join the fray. Percy takes another shot at Delilah, and the smoke demon urges him to finish her. With his next shot, he tries to take off her arm and leave her unconscious. She falls off the platform where they can't see her, and his success is questionable. Scanlan and Grog converge on the twins. Vax feeds Vex a potion, but like Pike's spell, it has no effect. The party begins to panic at this point, rushing simply to get Vex out of the room, forgetting about Delilah. Vax ties a rope to Vex and throws it to Percy, who jumps off the wall, taking damage to haul her up and over as quickly as possible. With Vex on the roof, Pike tries Cure Wounds, which still doesn't work. Keyleth remains focused on the remnants of the orb, while everybody else focuses on Vex. Pike tries a divine intervention, but that also fails. Grog jumps down with Vex, and with 3 successful death saves and distance from the orb, she awakes. Keyleth and Scanlan, alone with the orb, try to learn something about it, but have never seen anything like it. Percy and Grog work on opening the doors from the outside, while Pike tries once again to heal Vex, but the magic is still blocked. Keyleth tries to jam a piece of the green glass into the orb and suffers several points of damage as she has to avoid getting sucked into it. Percy wants to destroy the orb, but it's clear that they are unprepared to do so and they have more pressing matters at hand. Grog grabs the unconscious Delilah and heads out of the temple. Percy grabs Cassandra and the group staggers to get some distance from the ziggurat. Keela stays behind, planning to wild shape and tear the thing down with her earth elemental form, but when she tries, she is unable to shift. Instead, she chooses to run with everybody else, and that's where the episode ends.
Yeah, so very exciting second half. Like, this is the penultimate cinematic Vox Machina scene, right? So far in this campaign. Like, I really understand why the animated series started with Briarwood arc, and especially with the first season starting or like ending with the Briarwood fight. Like, this is the fight, capital T, capital F.
Yeah. And it's very much remembered that way, which I find so interesting considering they struggle so much with mechanics and the storytelling is so chopped up by their own struggles with telling it. But it's still such a good story that it overcomes all of that and is still this hugely iconic piece of the lore and the history of this world and a huge point in their success as a company. Like, this is the thing that people talk about, and yet they struggle through it. This is a rough episode to watch when you really think about it. It's just that the story is that strong.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned that because while you were talking, I kept thinking about how well they were working together. But you're right, because there is a lot of struggle that we don't cover in the summary of this episode,
Hmm.
like glossed version of this episode. And, there was a lot of arguments around like Keyleth and the water control spell and whether she can even move blood off of the orb,
Yep.
and how the magic works within the orb's radius and all of that, and just getting out of the acid pit in the first half of this episode was
Yeah.
quite painful to watch for them.
Well, and it's things like they can't figure out like how death saves are supposed to work,
Mm.
or like what the limitations of their spells are. Ashley can't see the map, so she's having trouble like figuring things out. Neither of them, like none of them at this point, have a great view because it's a 2D map on a table they're not sitting at. So
Yeah.
they're constantly arguing over who's how far away and what they might be able to do. And it's a little bit rough,
Hmm.
but it's got such iconic moments
Hmm.
hidden in the middle of all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's kind of how life is, right?
Hmm.
Like that's ultimately what makes the difference between like scripted and unscripted.
Yeah.
Because in the scripted animated version of this, it all gels very well, and like the action moves, and like
Hmm.
their best, and like you see them shining in their element. And then we have the unscripted actual play of this game, and it is chaos plus great moments. And
Yeah.
I think that's what makes this, I mean, D&D in general, such an attractive process for people, because it is
Yeah.
reflective of real life.
Well, and like everything that happens in the animated show is based off of stuff from here. Like it is, they have those shining moments. You just have to put up with all the mess in between.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
which is kind of the difference that makes this so interesting. I love this scene in the animated show, but genuinely, I kind of prefer the original version,
Mhm.
just because it is so raw and so real.
Mhm.
um I think especially when we get to like Vax's panic, that comes
Yeah,
across so much
absolutely.
better in the like first live action version because it is so real.
I'm even thinking about like Percy's reaction to the Cassandra showing up on his gun too. Like
Hmm.
that doesn't really show up that much in the animated version either. Like it's there, but the panic of the group is not necessarily there.
Right.
Like that's honestly one of my favorite parts of watching these episodes, is seeing everyone's facial expressions while all of this stuff is going on. And I
Yeah.
think that that's one of the things that I do enjoy about Keyleth as a character, is, both her and Marisha are just so frustrated time and time and
Yes.
time and time again by the mechanics of playing a druid, that like it's painful for me to watch, because like her frustration, it heightens my frustration with it. But
Yeah.
I enjoy the pain of
Yeah.
watching her struggle with it.
Yep. As someone who prefers to play druids, yeah, playing a druid is frustrating, and the mechanics don't really do what you want them to do most of the time. It's still a great class to play, but oh my god, is that class frustrating?
Yeah, yeah. And that's ultimately what I get out of watching these episodes,
Hmm.
is the emotionality of not only the actors acting, but the players in
Yeah.
the acting scenario and the D&D scenario, because it is like, I'll keep going back to this, but it is such a great mirror of how life works. Is like you are
Hmm.
presented with unexpected elements, unexpected twists, unexpected curveballs in life, and you just have to, A, manage your reaction to whatever it is, and B, make the best decision you can for moving forward from that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's an interesting game. And then you throw in like DM moments like I broke the world for us that
Oh,
just shape everything. And oh, that line.
yeah.
You can tell Matt had that planned.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but in a good way of like he was prepared to tell them about her motivations the second it was appropriate and to give them this line of this is a huge deal and you have just met this unhinged woman who will do anything. This isn't just a wizard going a little bit too far. This is a woman who will go to the ends of the earth and already has.
Mhm.
Like she has crossed the line and we are past everything.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all he needed was
One line.
like 4 words.
Yeah. 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 I mean, the characterization, I think, is just phenomenal all around. Like, not only the player characters, but the NPCs as well. Like
Mm-hmm.
Cassandra, too, when they're dealing with the aftermath of this situation, is just chef's kiss.
Yeah. No, I love her in this scene because she is a complicated character and she is allowed to be complicated here. Like she is struggling with the fact that her brother is returned, but also these are the people she's been supporting for years.
Hmm.
And she's allowed to make bad choices
Yeah.
and to, make things more difficult for the party, and yet they don't immediately turn on her. Like
Yeah.
she is given an amount of grace that they don't necessarily always have for NPCs.
Hmm.
And like I love that for the way that they are telling this story.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, she's got issues, but also she is Percy's sister, and that means something.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a really important point because you're right. They're not very forgiving of NPCs often,
Hmm.
especially when they do make bad choices. And I think something that was skipped in the summary too is her reaction to the Briarwoods dying and her confusion after Silas died, specifically after the charm wore off, is like,
Hmm.
she is just flat out in shock and has no idea how to even react to that situation. So that also adds to the ambiguity of where her loyalties lie.
Hmm.
So much can be projected onto her state of shock, which is what clearly Grog and Vax are doing when they, knock her out and tie her up.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I don't think they're in any kind of headspace to deal with this effectively. Like they've got their own issues happening and it is not helped by whatever Cassandra's got going on. Um, but it's interesting how little Percy says
Mm,
at this point. Like he's not addressing her, he's not trying to comfort her, he's not trying to confront her. He's just trying to keep her alive both from the Briarwoods and from his friends, and he will deal with her later. Like
stick a
she is
pin in
not
it.
his priority.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Stick a pin in it, come back to it later. Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, is definitely valid in this
It's
situation.
a strategy. It is not a bad strategy,
Yeah.
but it's a strategy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been thinking a lot about this concept of how in life and in fictional tales, there tends to be this like, you have to pass a test in order to graduate. Like you
Hmm.
have all of these lessons that you're learning up until this point, but then there needs to be, or there often is, this ultimate test to pass before you graduate to the next phase of whatever it is. And I think this is the graduation test for Vox Machina.
Yeah. I would agree. I think this is kind of there's the whole iconic I have passed through fire thing. I think this is the first time it happens.
Yeah.
I think this is when we really start to see that that's how Vox Machina works
Yeah. Yeah.
as a whole.
Yeah.
Um, they thrive when they are pushed to their limits and learn something about themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's true of all of us. But like I think we see it in Keyleth's use of the sunbeam to take
Mm-hmm.
Silas. I think we see it in Percy's killing or of Delilah or whatever
Right.
you want to call it. I think we also see it in Keyleth's attempt to stab the orb. Like she rolls a natural 20 on that. And
Yeah.
it's made very patently clear in the playthrough that if she had not rolled that natural 20, there would have been some really bad things that happened as a result. And I think
Yeah.
you'll see it in Vex surviving that spell from Delilah as well by one
Mm-hmm.
hit point.
Yeah.
Like
There's a lot of very close calls.
very close calls where they triumphed,
Mm-hmm.
but by the skin of their teeth. And I think that that's what ultimately makes it the passing grade for this graduation test.
Yeah. This is a tough fight for them, and I think it's tougher than they anticipated it would be. Like they were very prepared for it to be a hard fight.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that they were quite prepared for it to turn into this.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the ritual was, I think they were, unprepared for the ritual to start. As soon as
Absolutely.
Delilah bamfed away, they kind of paused instead
Mm-hmm.
of immediately pursuing her. I think their mindset was a little bit different going in than it maybe needed to be. And
Mm-hmm.
it made their, like, the only reason they knew that the ritual was happening was because Vex had happened to be above where she could see.
Mm-hmm.
Otherwise, they would have had no idea. At that point, they were not paying attention. They did not
Mm-hmm.
seem to care. They were just letting it happen. And like that is a kind of big oversight
Yes.
that I think they learn a lot from.
Yes. I
Um,
honestly think they were more prepared for the Beholder fight in
mhm,
Crackhammer in the Underdark than they
yeah.
were for this fight.
Yeah. They were prepared in the sense that they had gone out of their way to get holy weapons and to have Pike there and to focus on radiant and daylight damage. But they weren't prepared for what this fight actually was.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they were more focused on Silas than
Mm-hmm.
Delilah.
Mm-hmm.
They were very much underestimating who their true enemy was. Like they were very, very focused on this vampire.
Well, it goes to show you you have to know what your enemy's motivations are, not just what their
Mm-hmm.
competencies and skills are, but what their motivations are,
Yeah,
which up until this point, they don't really have a lot of information on.
right.
They know
And
that
like,
Silas is a vampire. They know that Delilah is probably a necromancer, but they don't know why they're doing what they're doing here in Whitestone.
no, and they still won't for a while. Um, to be fair, we won't either, but they were, they were told that there was a ritual coming. They were told that she was preparing for something and they still didn't follow when she left.
Mm-hmm.
That seems to have slipped through their notice a little bit, and I think it's something that really taught them the danger of letting that happen.
Yeah. 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 Loose threads, man. They'll come back to life.
Mm-hmm. Because Matt plays with consequences, and I love it.
Here comes a consequence, consequence, consequence. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Real life. What does this remind you of?
I think the pure chaos just felt very appropriate these days. Uh, lots of big life changes are happening right now. So it was just a reminder of the chaos is a thing that will end at some point, but pay attention while you're in it.
No.
Um,
Yeah. Tell me about it.
because that just because your life feels chaotic and things feel overwhelming doesn't mean things stop mattering. Um, so it was just it felt very similar to a lot of real life right now, just because things are chaotic as hell. And
Yeah.
it's a lot to deal with, but that doesn't mean it's any less important to pay attention to what is happening around you.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I am. part of my work at the moment, I think, is just one big D&D adventure. Because I just keep getting hit with these curveballs, like multiple curveballs a day at this point.
Of course.
And I'm just like, oh man, like one, I do have to manage my reaction to them and not let the triggers take over of being
Mhm.
like, reacting out of pure reaction. I'm like, all right, I need to think before I react. And I also just need to go with the flow a lot of the time and just being like, all right, we're turning this way. All right, we're turning that way. All right, we're turning this way. And just, going with the flow with it. And there is a lot of chaos as well, but there's also a lot of bright moments too. Just
Mhm.
like with this second half, like there are a lot of highlights going on, and it's worth focusing on those more so than the chaos that's happening in between.
Easier said than done, but yes.
It is. And like, what would the animated version of my life look like versus the in real life play-by-play chaos that I experience?
Yeah.
Mm,
Big
yeah,
questions.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm also dealing with coworkers who add a lot of chaos to the mix as well. And I think
Fun.
it's a good analogy to talk about coworkers who don't understand the mechanics of the game. Of being like, wait, how do druids work?
The
And
important questions.
sometimes I misunderstand the mechanics as well, and I'm like, oh, okay, I learned something there, not using that spell next time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So what are we gonna do about it?
I think the lesson that I'm going to take from this is actually a really small one of it's okay to put a pin in big things
Oh,
when there is something more pressing going on. Like you
oh
don't have to do
man.
everything at once, even if it's relevant. You can, do what Percy did with Cassandra and be like, okay, later, still important, but later. And it's it's really hard to put aside those big things. And
I
I'm really,
yeah.
really bad at it.
I'm
Um,
struggling with this answer of yours. I don't like it. I don't want to like it, but I do.
right? Like it's not something I'm good at. I hate doing it, but I think it's a good reminder that sometimes it needs to happen to succeed.
I'm gonna have to go think about that one. Hmm.
Well, that's what the show is for, teaching
Hmm.
us big things we don't want to know.
Hmm. What am I gonna do about it? Well, like I said, focus on the highlights, focus on those silver linings that I do get throughout the day of chaos. Like I'm working 60 hours a week right now, and literally when I get home from doing whatever I'm doing out there in the world, I have an hour to eat dinner and go to bed. Like that's just my
Yep.
schedule at this point is I'm working, sleeping, eating, cooking, and cleaning. Those are the five main activities. Um, and maybe I need to develop a practice of as I am getting ready for bed each night, just going over the highlights for the day and
Hmm.
cementing those in my brain more so than the chaos of the day. I think that would make
Yeah.
me a happier camper.
Honestly, that's a really good practice to get into. I say as someone who has never been able to maintain that practice, but I also recognize that it could be super helpful.
Yeah, but there is also a big thing in my life right now that may need a pin in it, and I don't want to put a pin in it. So I might need to take a little bit of your medicine as well.
Yeah. We'll see how it works out. I'm gonna try.
Yeah, my impatient ass does not like putting a pin in things that I want.
Yeah, same.
I'd
It's
rather put a pin in the other stuff, but I cannot put a pin in the other stuff. So,
kind of by definition how this works.
hmm. Wow. I'll go think about that all day now. Thank you.
No problem. Happy to help.
Well, anything else you want to add before we wrap up?
No, there's a lot here, but it's such a good episode. It's worth watching.
Yeah, I mean the one-liners alone, like I'm almost tempted to get like "I broke the world for you" tattooed somewhere. Mm,
Mm, yeah,
that is devotion at its purest,
and
truth,
most insane.
and most purely insane. Yes,
Yes.
absolutely. I mean, talk about villains that we love,
Yeah, that's fair.
right? Like, yeah, Delilah and Silas, they are a bottomless well of consideration for us,
Hmm. They are in the
but
best way.
in the best way. And I will not spoil anything moving forward for that. But this is powerful stuff that we're talking about. An audience, we definitely encourage you to share your own thoughts and feelings and insights with us as well. We'd love to know how this Briarwood arc has affected you because we are coming to the end of the Briarwood arc at this point in time. And how has it impacted you? How did you experience it? How did you grow alongside with them? Special thanks to Atlas for joining me. It's been a pleasure.
Always happy to be here.
Yes, yes. And next time we'll be discussing Campaign 1, Episode 35, Part 1. And joining me will be Petal, so I'm excited for that. As always, I'm looking for more co-hosts and guests, so if you're interested, just please join me. I'll send you something. In the meantime, please comment, like, subscribe below, and follow us on Tumblr at Sacred Reading CR. Even though I haven't updated it in months, I will one of these days. And until next time, may all beings be peaceful, may all beings be free, and be the chaotic good you wish to see in the world. Take care, guys.
Bye.